Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast with your host, Michael Sapersky, where we take you deep into the world of elite consultants.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Sapersky here. Great to have you. And I'm really excited today because we have Mitch Russo with us. Mitch, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
Definitely. So Mitch, for those that don't know you, tell us what you do.
Sure. So here's what I do. What I do is I work with specific types of companies who are looking to grow substantially relatively quickly over the course of the next 90 days to 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I work with this type of company that can utilize the business model that I'm an expert in, and that's called certification.
Okay, so tell us more. What does certification mean for those just, they have no idea what it means?
Sure. So most people listening to this will probably know brands such as Intuit or Infusionsoft or Salesforce. Would you agree?
Yep, definitely.
So all those companies built their entire organization around certification when they were much smaller. So here's an example. Let's take Intuit. It turns out that I built certification for the first time in 1989, and I had done it so well that the CEO of Intuit, Scott Cook, came and asked me if I would give him and teach him everything I know about doing and building a program like this, which I agreed to do. And later he returned the favor by giving me back-end access to QuickBooks and Quicken so that I could interface my software when no other competitor had that advantage. So he took certification and he created basically his accountant certification for QuickBooks. Well, that's grown into the thousands at this point and has propelled the company into the billion-dollar sales mark. Same with Infusionsoft. Infusionsoft, as probably most people know, is a software company. And they were known at first for having a very difficult product to use. In fact, many people nicknamed it Confusionsoft.
Right.
And later what ended up happening is that they had become so strapped in terms of trying to deal with customer support that they actually enrolled their existing clients just like I did and then built certification to train them, which later evolved into a worldwide network of resellers and trainers who are out there every day reselling Infusionsoft and booking thousands and thousands of hours per week in training, all paid.
Right.
So certification is a way of mobilizing your existing client base if you are a consulting company, a training company, a software company, of course, and in some cases even a medical device company, because these people need to get other doctors, for example, out there and teaching doctors how to use their medical device. That comes with certification. But here's the trick, and this is the most difficult element of this. When I look at other certification programs and I ask myself, well, what are they doing wrong? In many cases, all they do is award a certificate at the end. We're all familiar with, say, Digital Marketer. They sell certification for $1,000, and the only qualification is that you need to be able to pay with a credit card. So if you have a credit card, you're qualified. And if you buy their certification, and you should complete it, you get a certificate. And then at that point, you might say that you're on your own. In fact, this model is so worthless, they charge $1,000, but they frequently have it on sale for $500. I recently saw them offering their certification programs for $99. So clearly what we're seeing here is that people invented a way to sell a certificate for $1,000. They sold as many as they thought they could, and they dropped the price by 10 times because ultimately it's worthless. And that's part of what makes the experience of being certified sometimes negative for people, because they spend all this money, they spend all this time, they get certified, but in the end, they don't know what to do with their certification.
Right.
What I do with my clients, Michael, is I build a business around their company so that they can invite potential certified consultants to build their own profession around the business model which my CEO client and I create together.
And Mitch,
and then
How did you get to where you are today? So you become this, an expert in helping companies to grow through, creating this whole certification model and opportunity. But let's go back. I mean, what stage did you get involved? Like, where did this idea even come from?
Well, that's a great question, Michael. You see, it turns out that I, like most people, I had a job and I had some other activities that I did. I was a very ambitious young man in my 20s. So I had a job. Mm-hmm. I also programmed at night for $25 an hour. So I would leave my job at 6 or 6:30. I would drive 30 miles. I would then work in the basement of some guy's house for 4 to 6 hours per night. I'd get up in the morning and I'd go back to my job.
Yeah.
And my objective was to save some money so I could buy some real estate, because I knew real estate is a good way to ensure your future, which I then did. But here's the thing. I got to the point where this job was so uncomfortable for me, and it was so dissonant to who I am and incongruous with where I wanted to be, that I needed to leave it. And I knew that I needed to leave it. And I knew that unless I did something different, I would be miserable. Mm. So I started to come up with ideas for businesses. And I actually came up with 5 different ideas. And I started all 5 businesses almost at the same time, thinking, let's see which one catches fire. And that's how my software company eventually started. I ended up having a conversation with a neighbor, believe it or not, and he and I talked about this idea I had for keeping track of time. Well, he loved it, and he actually on his own went off and built a prototype.
Okay.
The other 4 were somewhat dead on arrival because of different circumstances. Someday, if we're ever having a beer together, I'll tell you some funny stories about those. But ultimately, it was time slips that really took off. And then here I was now. I had quit my job. He had quit his job. We had been working on the product in stealth mode for months. We were just about to release it. And then the IRS changes their ruling about keeping track of time to deduct your computer from your taxes. Mm-hmm. And all at once, our entire company had been building something completely worthless.
Mitch, before I want to explore that, before we kind of go there in terms of what you did at that point, you mentioned that you had 5 ideas for different businesses, and many consultants, right, have 5 and sometimes more ideas in terms of who their ideal clients might be in the market that they should go after, most often because they bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise and experience to the table over the years of corporate life and many different positions. How did you, if you can just kind of share with us, how did you go about narrowing in on what really was the one, ultimate winner for you? And looking back, do you think that it was a good idea that you took these 5 ideas and tried to move forward with them all at once? Or would you suggest that someone do some other kind of, take another approach and really try and gain more focus early on?
Well, okay. I mean, I think we're all different. I think some people will work well by trying multiple things at once. Mm-hmm. I think some people will need to focus and spend as much focus as they can on something to really ensure that it works. For me, I was basically loading up my opportunity gun and firing all 5 bullets at once and seeing if I could hit a target.
Right.
Now, it didn't mean that I focused all my time on all 5. I'll give you an example of one of them and how little time it really took. So at one point, I had made the decision, which filters through the universe so that the universe now knows that I am now looking to build a business. I'm looking to leave my job. And within weeks, I was approached by somebody at one of my client companies who said, "Hey, I'm going to Asia to find vendors in the electronics industry, mm-hmm. And I don't know anything about electronics. Do you want to join me?" So all of a sudden, things started to find me.
Right.
Right. So I didn't turn that down. I explored it. Now that didn't work out, but there were other things like that showed up that I felt like could be opportunities in disguise, or maybe in not so disguise. And as a result, I followed them. And By following them, that's the only way I was able to determine which would be successful.
I think that's a great point that you're making, right? That not everyone is the same. That for some people, having that real clear focus on one thing right away is going to serve them best, and for others, it's okay to explore a little bit and to find and kind of refine as they move forward. So now let's fast forward, right? You've focused in creating this company called Time Slips. The IRS changes, everything that pretty much, as you said, makes your whole business model, puts it in jeopardy. A lot of people, right, consultants and other types of professionals find themselves in challenging times, right? Yep. What did you do at that point? How did you handle that setback?
Okay, so there was a lamp in the room above my garage. I picked it up and I flung it against the wall.
That's a good start.
Yeah, and my partner and I, we broke up laughing at that point. I mean, we cracked up, and we complained, we screamed, we hollered. We said it's not fair. We made plans to blow up the IRS. I mean, all these different things that were basically a way of trying to express our frustration. Mm-hmm. And then when the dust settled, and it wasn't that long, maybe an hour or so later, the dust settled, we said, look, we just came up with this very cool piece of technology. Where else can we use it? What else can we do with it? Mm. And that's where the idea of applying it to law firms to keep track of their time came from. So the whole thing happened in an afternoon. It was very lucky for us. Some people can go months trying to find the solution, but it happened quickly for us because we were open to exploring the unknown. And remember a minute ago I said sometimes opportunity comes disguised as a problem. Well, if we would have gone forward with the current idea, the original idea, what would have ended up happening was that we probably would have sold a few copies of our software and gone out of business. Mm-hmm. So this disaster, quote unquote, turned out to be the biggest opportunity we could have ever found.
And how did you put, looking back, what do you think gave you the ability to look beyond the that challenge and get so focused on it that you didn't spend, or months on it? Like you were actually able to move past it and in a matter of hours, already pivot to something that ultimately, became very successful. A lot of people have trouble around that, right? They get stuck on something and they spend weeks or months, and in some cases even years, just kind of spinning their wheels and not seeing the opportunities, instead just focusing on the challenges and the negative around them. Looking back, how do you think you got yourself into that place? Or did that just come naturally to you?
No, I don't think it came naturally at all. I think I was about as disappointed as a person can be. I felt devastated. I made light of it, but it was true. I felt completely devastated. I felt like I had just basically walked away and crushed my entire future. But ultimately, I think what got me through it was letting it go, was understanding that, yes, I had happened to be in a situation where, it's sort of like building a building on a cliff, and because the view will be amazing, but the cliff basically completely evaporates before you're able to get your permits or after you buy the land and after you put the foundation in or something like that. The idea is that look what the cliff left behind. It left behind a space. Well, what might you do with that space? Well, might you build on more solid ground? Might you be able to make use of the current circumstances? So if you go with the attitude that says, look, we just had a disaster. Where is the gold in this disaster? Because there always is. Mm-hmm. Where is the opportunity that we are currently not seeing because of our emotional disposition and because we're not looking for it?
It's a great example. How did you get to that place? Is there an experience that taught that to you? Is it something that you read many years ago in some book? Is it just life, kind of going through the motions and facing challenges and overcoming them yourself? Like how did you get to that insight? Because I think a lot of people struggle in seeing that in the same way that you're sharing right now.
Look, I was desperate. Honestly, I had just left my job. Mm-hmm. I had no other options. My back was against the wall and my partner was in exactly the same place. So the two of us are sort of looking at the crumbled foundation that just tipped over the cliff. And we're saying, what do we do now? Well, here's one thing we didn't say. Let's go back and get another job.
Right. Yeah.
We hated working for other people. And to this day, I don't make a very good employee. I never would, never will, because I understand what the nature of that relationship is. So I knew that I would never, ever, ever want to take another job. But I also knew that I had this burning desire. My desire was stronger than my grief and was stronger than any other emotion, even the disappointment that I felt. I knew I had to figure it out. I just knew it. I didn't know how. I didn't know what method. I didn't have some deep inner knowledge or secret idea, or I wasn't taught by an ascended master. I had none of that. Mm-hmm. I was just desperate. And I knew that if the two of us, two smart guys, I knew if we put our heads together, we would come up with something. That's the only thing I knew.
And then your company Time Slips ended up being acquired.
Yes.
How many years later was that?
Well, we were slow. I mean, first of all, I was very, very unsophisticated financially. I did not understand what venture capital was. To me, all I could see was large vulture-looking birds with wings, diving in and scooping up the goodies.
Right.
So I thought of venture capital as evil. We stayed away from it. So we decided that we would build this business on exactly what we had, which was we had some money, not a lot. We had some money, and we had very, very, very little in expenses. Mm-hmm. So we built the business above my garage in my house. And I think the sum total of our expenses during that first month were about, I'm going to say about $125 a month.
Wow. Very lean, yeah.
So if we would have sold 2 copies of our software for $99, we would cover our expenses. Right. So we could be profitable on 2 copies of our software. But one of the things that we had realized was that we did not know if this would ever work. And we didn't know how long it would take to work. And there was one tipping point later in the future of the company that made it clear exactly that it would. But until that point, we had operated just like you and your family operate, Michael, in your own checkbook. You don't typically spend a whole lot more than you make, and you probably even put some away to save. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the same formula we used when we built our company. We basically said, look, we have already set aside what we need to live individually for the next year. Now, once that's set aside, then we don't really need to add more expenses until we make more money. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, sure, we would love to bring in some help and maybe hire, who knows, an agency here and there. But the bottom line is we said, no, not until we make the money.
Right.
That's what we did.
Okay, and so fast forward, the business, you grew the business and it was acquired, and really what I want to just focus on for those listening, because we're mainly going to be having consultants, that are listening to this. I know that you went on and you had a role, right, a very important role with a company that Tony Robbins and the late Chet Holmes, kind of started, or just talk to us a little bit about what that experience was like.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early-stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early-stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com /audio. That's consultingsuccess.com /audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com /audio. That's consultingsuccess.com /audio, AUDIO.
Sure. So while I was growing Timeslips Corporation, this very pesky, persistent sales guy named Chet Holmes kept trying to sell me ad space. And I resisted. I wouldn't buy. I just couldn't believe how pushy he was. Finally, after a year and a half, I had bargained him into a position where he was going to give me way more than he originally offered. Mm-hmm. And I said yes. Well, those ads became the cornerstone of my marketing in the legal profession. And at that point, we actually became friends. Mm-hmm. And we became really good friends, lifelong friends, which we didn't know at the time. But what ended up happening later was that after my company was sold, Chet and I stayed friends. We would talk about every week, talk about life and fate and all these things. And one day I was talking to him and he asked me for some help. And this is years after I sold Timeslips. And I said, of course I'd help you. And I got involved. And before I knew it, I was running the company for him. And he then told me that after 17 years, he'd finally gotten to bring Tony Robbins into a conversation about building a company together. Mm-hmm. So that's when Tony, Chet, and I got on the phone every Thursday night, and we started to figure out how we could possibly put this together. And finally, after about 6 months or 3 months of talking and 6 months of planning, we were able to launch the Business Breakthroughs International, that company, with an event in Las Vegas called the Ultimate Business Mastery Summit, and headlined by both Chet Holmes and Tony Robbins. We also had 15 other people there, like Brendan Bouchard and Jay Abraham and many others. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that we were going to take that event, record all of the content, turn it into courses, and then build the company based on offering that box of CDs and DVDs. And that's how the company started.
Wow. You said one thing there that just kind of caught my attention, that back in the day, Chet Holmes would be very persistent, right, in selling you ad space. And then you became friends. So, a lot of people have this idea that someone's going to be very persistent, that keeps, trying to get your attention, and to have a conversation, so on and so forth, would turn you off. But here, did it turn you off? And then did you later on just decide, oh, he's actually a nice guy? How did that come about?
It's sort of funny because ultimately, I laughed at this guy. It was almost like a clown cartoon of sorts. I mean, he was like the typical sales guy who just would never let up. Mm-hmm. But here's what ended up happening. After, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months of this, I figured most salespeople would have given up by now, but he didn't give up. Mm-hmm. In fact, if anything, he adapted to me. And he started sending me things in the mail, and he started really working to understand my business much better and started connecting me with other people in the industry. So he was trying to add value to my life very, very, very distinctly. Mm-hmm. And I started to respect him at that point.
Yeah, I love that, because I think there's so many people out there, Mitch, that have this idea that, sales is still a bad word, and that they hold back reaching out and doing a lot of follow-up because they're concerned that they might come across as being too salesy or too pushy. But this is a really great example of how you can use that approach to ultimately win someone over and to differentiate yourself.
Here's something that Chet taught me that I'll never forget. When Chet came to me, he said to me, listen, I know with my heart that if you advertise in my magazines, it's going to build your business. I know for certain that this is going to work. And what I later learned from Chet is that he believed that he had a moral obligation to sell me advertising. Mm. And when a salesperson approaches a client with the deep understanding that what they are selling is truly going to change their lives and the lives of their families and the lives of everybody who works for them, then there is no possibility of that person ever feeling like they're bothering that person or they're being too persistent, because they know that they have a moral responsibility to close that sale, to help other people.
How do they get to that place? How does someone get to that place where that belief just becomes natural for them?
Well, part of it is understanding the way people are and the way people work. I mean, part of it is also understanding the product. Mm-hmm. So if you walked into a company and you saw a product and you saw testimonial after testimonial after testimonial. I mean, there's clear proof that this thing works. And then you get on the phone with somebody who has the same exact problem and they're seeking a solution, which you have, but they're not interested. How's that going to make you feel?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you go. That's where you start. You start by having a unshakable desire to ensure that you're helping another. So if you come from a place of helping instead of from a place of selling, then you're going to ensure your own success and you're going to be delivering something of extreme value to your prospects who then become clients.
Right. So now let's move a little bit more kind of current day. Mitch, you went on, right? You ran this business for Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes. After that, is that when you then ventured out into kind of, running your own consulting practice and helping others with this certification process?
Well, to back up a little bit further. I had been working with clients to help clients for decades. So even after I sold Timeslips Corporation, I basically went into business as a consultant. And I became so enamored with some of my clients that I actually invested in them.
Right.
I made 19 venture investments at that time. But I've been helping clients and helping small companies scale for many, many years. So when I was done with Chet and Tony, after Chet passed away, I knew my time was over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote the book, The Invisible Organization. And it was in the writing of that book it was somewhat cathartic for me. I was able to pour everything I knew about what I did to grow that company to 300 people and 25 million in sales completely virtually into that book. Then at that point, I started to realize I did an assessment of what my strengths were.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to figure out what I could do next. I mean, I was still a young man. I wasn't ready to retire. So my belief was that some of my greatest strengths would potentially be good business ideas. And honestly, some of them were complete duds. So I went around for several years trying to come up with something that would truly work for other people and I thought would make, decent money for me and keep me very motivated and happy. But I could not figure out how to make those things work. And I think you and I chatted about those over the years as well.
Right. So yeah, go ahead.
So that's kind of what I'm saying. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out which of your very most powerful skills can be set up in such a way so that they can be both marketed and useful to others.
Right. And when you started consulting, how did you go about getting clients? For you, what was the most effective way of finding, the ideal client for you? Still is the most ideal way for me, and that is attending masterminds. Okay, so are these you're talking about like specific paid groups that you're going to, or is it more like a general event for a specific industry?
It's a little of both. I am invited. Luckily, I am invited to many masterminds complimentary. And I'm not invited to participate for the year-long program, for example, but I am invited as a guest to many masterminds, and I don't think I can remember leaving a mastermind without securing at least one client. Okay.
So you go to a mastermind, and then how do you go about finding someone that could be a client? Like what is a typical kind of day or process look like for you to be able to successfully find and engage in a conversation with someone at these events?
Yeah, all I'm really doing, Michael, is I'm looking to help other people. I mentioned that before. It's my only goal. So if I go to a mastermind, I'm there to serve. So that means that, I happen to be old enough and experienced enough to have seen many of the solutions to problems that people in the room are having. So I try to take my time and focus it entirely on others to see if I could help them get to the next step in their business. And in many cases, I could sit with somebody for several hours and completely map out a solution to exactly where their company should go. And at that point, if it's appropriate, we'll talk a little bit about what I do.
Right.
But that's really the only approach I have, is knowing that I'm there to help. That is what my goal is.
Yeah. What's your view though on that, Mitch? Because a lot of people have this concern of giving away too much, right? They don't want to give away so much that a prospective buyer may not need their services. So it sounds like, your approach is just to really open up the door to as much value as you possibly can demonstrate, even in a shorter period of time. But just what is your mindset around giving away kind of immense value to people?
It's very simple for me. Most people these days are not paying a lot for information. And if they are, those days are becoming numbered. Information by itself is not particularly useful. I mean, it's enlightening in some ways, but what really only counts is implementation. So if people understand how much I know about something, and they know that they need it, and they know that they probably can't implement it on their own, particularly not at the level that they need to be successful first time through, then it only makes sense to talk to me about helping them in a paid fashion.
Right.
That's how I do it.
Good, beautiful. So Mitch, here, you've certainly, I think, as people can get a taste for, you've had a lot of experiences, right? From building and selling businesses to helping others build their businesses to consulting many others through this process that you take them through now around certification. What is your mindset around and just, thought process around like work-life balance? How do you balance growing businesses and growing other people's businesses with making sure that you're taking care of yourself? Right.
So I work from the standpoint that I take care of myself first, and then I allocate whatever time is left over to working with my clients or working with people who need some help.
What does that look like?
So for example, every morning I'm up at somewhere around 7 a.m., 6:30 to 7, and I go downstairs. I have a cup of bulletproof coffee. I sit and I read for a half an hour spiritual books or books written before the Gutenberg press, and I make notes in my journal. And when that half hour is up, I then go to the gym, and I go every day. And I would do what I do at the gym. I come home, I get settled, I start answering email, and my first appointment begins at 11 a.m.
Interesting.
So that's how my day starts.
Right. So you really are making sure that you're taken care of before you start trying to take care of others.
Yeah, you have to. It's sort of as they say, if the jet is going to be coming down in a crash, you got to put your own air mask on first before you help others, or you can't help others.
Right. And is that something that you've always done, or is it just more recent?
Oh no, it was after my daughter was born that I realized that I needed to make sure I had that time. So in the beginning, when I started TimeSlips Corporation, I worked 15 plus hours a day for 7 months straight, because this was now going to be my future. This business, I knew it was my grand obsession. I knew it was going to be my future, and therefore I dedicated and devoted all of my time to it.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, it's a different perspective certainly when you have kids. But I like the way that you've carved that out and really have a great start to every day. Mitch, you mentioned that you find a lot of business, right? A lot of opportunities at masterminds. What's your overall thinking and your personal experience in terms of working with coaches, mentors, or joining masterminds? Has that played a role in growing your business over the years?
Yes, it has. And I would say more mentorship than anything else. I've been very, very, very lucky to have found people to help me along the way in my journey. And I've given back, and I continue to give back as well. But I have a coach. As of today, I still have a coach. I think having a coach or having a mentor or both is instrumental in overcoming the circuits that you end up running in your own head. Somebody has to be able to look at what's going on in your head with you and basically guide you to where you need to be. So my coach is not at all a business coach. Not to say that I couldn't, benefit by that, but that's not where my coach is basically a mindset coach, right, more than anything else. And that's where I spend a lot of my time. Like I mentioned in the morning, I'm reading books that really boost my mindset and keep that ground fertile for me to plant the seeds of success in.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Mitch, I really want to thank you for sharing and for your time here today. For those that want to learn more about you, about your work, want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is to go to mitchrusso.com, my standard website. And on there, you could subscribe to my podcast, which I would love to see you do. And you could contact me. You could read. I have 50, 60 articles on building businesses on my website. I also have a link to the Power Tribes website, so you could see exactly what I do in certification as well.
Love it. So that's mitchrusso.com. We'll also link that up so that everyone can access that way. Mitch, again, thank you so much.
My pleasure, Michael.
Are you ready to take your consulting business to the next level? Learn more about the Accelerator Coaching Program at consultingsuccess.com.